The format for this meeting is a 10-minute speaker, our secretary's announcements, a coffee and snack break, and then our main speaker. Our first speaker tonight is Charlie.
Is this water for the speaker? No?
For the main speaker.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway, I'm out. My name is Charlie. I'm an alcoholic. And this is very unexpected. A gentleman in the parking lot just asked me about 30 minutes ago to speak. So I guess it was God's will. I'm always asking people to speak. I'm a secretary. And so, okay, muchas gracias. Thank you. So anyway, I was born in New Orleans, Louisiana, and I had a traumatic experience when I was about 5 years old. My violent father, alcoholic, was beating the hell out of my mother, and it was dark, and she was crying and screaming. I was crying and screaming, and nobody was there to help. Nobody. And I felt real sad, and it carried on. I can talk about it today. Every time I used to talk about it, I used to cry. I'm not crying today, so I've gotten a little bit better. Anyway, so some years went by, and that same father had died, and I had to go back to New Orleans and go to the funeral, and I had to stay at my aunt's house and sleep in a room with my uncle. Anyway, my uncle, he molested me, and that didn't feel too good. I felt really ashamed, and I felt really bad for a long time, and I didn't tell nobody. And so later on, about 12 years old, a junior high school counselor molested me, and I felt real bad. And anyway, all that doesn't make me an alcoholic, but thank God there was alcohol because I could drown those feelings, and I drowned them for years. I drowned those feelings, of of shame. It was like a lot of shame based, and so I just, so I didn't talk about it to nobody. You don't say that to your friends, and stuff like that, and so I wasn't able to share that until I got to Alcoholics Anonymous and got a sponsor and shared that in a fifth step. And I say that to a room full of people so it might encourage you. If I could say this in front of a room full of people, maybe you can get on one-on-one basis. You don't have to do it, say it to a whole room full of people, but on a one-on-one basis, you can share it with a sponsor, and and get it off your chest. And damn, I forgot I had a little thought. But anyway, so I like to drink. I like to drink. When I first had my first drink, it was just fantabulous. It just got me in another world. I didn't. And I smoked around. I messed around with pot a little bit. Smoked pot, and pot. I used to think, what are they thinking of me? What are they think? I drink some booze. I don't give a damn what you think of me. Shit. I didn't care. Whoopee, wahoo. And that's kind of guy. And I had a lot of fun with alcohol. I mean, we all did. We would have stayed out there so long. It was fun. Sure, it was exhilarating. Escape reality. Shoot. And that's what I did for a long time. And I didn't know what a blackout was until I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I remember those. I did that, but I couldn't tell nobody. I think they would have thought I was crazy, and I think people would still think you're crazy if you tell them you did this and you don't remember. But you guys understand. Yeah. And so I found out what a blackout was, and all these other feelings. Now, everybody gets here to AA at various different stages, I think. This is my opinion. I think we get here very different stages. I wasn't homeless. I didn't have the shakes. I heard one guy say he had the leaps. I identify with that. I had the leaps for alcohol drink. And I never sold blood. To drink, But one thing, some people never had blackouts. So I never had a DUI, which I should have, because what happened when the police stopped me back in the day, they'd let you go, I'd be drunk, had a bottle between, and they asked me pass the test, I'd pass the test, and they'd let you go. Nowadays, they don't do that. Then you go straight to jail. Do not collect $200 or nothing like that. But one thing I believe all us alcoholics do have in common is once we take one drink, it sets up the phenomenon of craving. And after that, we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know. I took a survey when I was going to junior college for a minute. I took a survey with some normies and asked them, have you ever been drunk? And they said, yeah. I said, really drunk, really bad? I said, yeah. And it was embarrassing. He said, yeah. I said, did you do it again? They said, no. And then I kept on asking. They said, no. But the alcohol, we kept doing it again and again. And that lets me know that's the difference between a non-alcoholic and an alcoholic. See, they can do it. They start drinking again. They remember that feeling. Oh, that got me in trouble. That made me look stupid. And, but with us, we could have just killed somebody in a car accident yesterday. It's like, once we have one, that's it. We're going to keep drinking, So anyway, like I said, I had a lot of fun with alcohol. Heck, it helped me, like even in puberty, because I would not dare to ask a woman to dance. I could not dare. I had to be drunk, And so I learned I had to get drunk before the party, and then at the party get drunk, and then I could act. Because if a woman said no, then I could just walk away and say, she wasn't nothing anyway, like that, And that's, but not drinking, I couldn't even do that, And it did teach me how to dance, because I couldn't dance and I was drunk and then quite the opposite. After I got sober, I didn't think I could dance sober. I went to these sober dances and watched people, and I said, are they really sober? They're up there cutting up and everything. I'm like, are they really saying, yeah? So I kept coming back, and after a couple of times, I found myself out there getting down, going crazy, having fun, And, and what I learned, okay, I want to say before I say anything else, I've been sober 26 years, like far as the steps and principles and things for this alcoholic, and it says it in the book, is that I learned I cannot stay angry. I can't stay angry. If I stay angry, I got to relieve it. And the only way we know how to relieve when we first come here is through alcohol and drugs. But after a while, if we want to stay sober, we learn to relieve it through acceptance, forgiveness and forgiving, and prayer, and getting with a sponsor and getting all that out, But you can't stay angry. Because you can't be happy angry, I mean, that's just the truth, Maybe you can drink some drink and be, but if you're sober, you can't be happy angry. So, and believe me, I get angry a lot, and have gotten angry a lot in these 26 years. And but now I'm starting to learn a little bit about emotional sobriety. I don't have to win every argument, with everybody, because I can argue about a lot of things, First they say, don't argue about race, politics, and religion, yeah. But I can argue about food, sports, players, and I can argue about anything. So, and get all into it and get all messed up. So, but I'm learning. I'm a piece of work in progress, and God ain't finished with me yet. I'm still living. But another thing I want to say is that when you're sober, a lot of things open up in your mind. Because, 2 minutes, that's all I need. But anyway, so a lot of things open up when you're sober. Because when we're drinking, all we're focused on is getting the next drink. That's it. Maybe a little sex or something, but that's about it. That's it. But, since I've been sober, I've done all kinds of things. I've joined ballroom dancing, bowling leagues, learned to ride a horse. It's like I was 35 years old at one time, and I never thought about riding a horse, and so you do that. And I like plays, big plays, little plays. I didn't think I liked that kind of stuff, but your mind does open up, and that's the beautiful thing. And God's got a plan for you, and so He had a plan for me. I was able to get a good career job, through a member. I ain't saying that's going to happen to you, but that's what happened to me, you know. And thank God, you know, I just kept going to meetings, kept going to work, you know. And so, and for anybody new, any newcomer who's trying to strive upon getting 1 year, and this thing you can all hear from everybody, is go to a lot of meetings. Because all the people I see make a year go to a meeting just about every year, every year. Go to a meeting just about every day and get a sponsor, and you'll probably make that year. Thanks for letting me share.
From Fullerton.
All right. Welcome in. Come on in. My name is John Brown, and I am an alcoholic. Charlie. Great job, Charlie. You set the tone for me, Charlie. Thank you. So I know for a fact there's only two paths in life that we are. We're either on a spiritual path or a psychopath, right? Today I'm on a spiritual path, thank God. And anyway, thanks for setting a great tone. Randy, thanks for asking me to come. It's always an honor and a privilege to be asked to do anything in Alcoholics Anonymous. I hope I never forget that it's a privilege and it's not something that I like to take for granted. I'd like to welcome all the newcomers that stood up and anybody that's coming back to Alcoholics Anonymous that's been away for a little while. I know how you feel. You know, it's a lonely place out there when you're sober and you're going crazy and you don't know what to do and you come back to a meeting and you get that sense of relief that Alcoholics Anonymous and meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous provides us. So welcome. Happy birthday to the 1-year-old and the 33-year-old. Birthdays are a big deal. If you don't think so, try to get one. You'll see how hard it is. Okay? You know? I'd like to thank my friend Dave and his beautiful wife Lily for taking me to dinner tonight. They've been friends of mine for a long, long time. And you know, when I came into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, you know, I was 35 years old. I was angry. I had a chip on my shoulder, and I wasn't looking for other men to guide me. I was defiant. I was a pain in the ass. And you know, what happens here is that over the course of time, you start to see people that you want to be like. And I've been very fortunate in my sobriety. My sobriety date is March 9th, 1995. I got a home group. It's the Monday night Seal Beach Speakers Meeting. And I have a sponsor who knows he's my sponsor because we talk all the time. His name is Tom Nolan. And you know, I was told those three things matter, but what happened to me in my sobriety was that I've been fortunate enough to have men in my life that were able to tell me the truth so I can get better. And we were having dinner tonight and we were talking about, you know, when life started to get really better in Alcoholics Anonymous. See, I got in here, I was 35, and I had my third drunk driving. I went to my first meeting at 18 years old, and I didn't get sober till I was 35. And I come into the rooms, and I'm gung-ho because, you know, I got a court case, and, you know, I have a wife, I have a child. I got all the heat on me. And what happened was that I would go to Alcoholics Anonymous, I'd show up to meetings, but, you know, I would sometimes get involved. And then I got a little bit more involved, and then life got better. Life got better for me, and I got a job, and you know, the wife stayed, and the daughter is getting better, and you know, we sometimes forget what gave us our lives. And that's why I welcome anybody that's been away for a little while, because you know, from 7 to 10, life got really good, and I forgot what gave me my sobriety. And pain is the biggest motivator in all of our lives, and you know, it took a lot of pain. And then I realized something happened. And what happened was, instead of saying no, I started saying yes. Hey, you going to that meeting tomorrow? Yes. Hey, who wants that commitment? Yes. Yes, yes, yes. And as I started to say yes, my life started to change. It started to change because I started to get involved in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it's been that way since then to now, you know, 27 and a half years later. And I'm really grateful for the fact that Alcoholics Anonymous, I can proudly say, is the most important thing in my life because it's given me a life that I could have never dreamed about. I could have never dreamed about the life that I had. And you know, the other thing that I love about Alcoholics Anonymous is that it did something for me that nothing else has ever done. I grew up in New York City, so I got kicked out. I got Catholic school couldn't fix me. My mother and father couldn't fix me. The New York City Police Department couldn't fix me. The LA Police Department couldn't fix me. Countless jobs, countless relationships. And what Alcoholics Anonymous did for me was give me the willingness to want to change. Because I was so stuck and stupid for such a long time. And I was so defiant that I didn't want to change. And I realized, thanks to the steps and good sponsorship, because I was afraid. You know, that defiance that I had with me my whole life, if you would have taken that defiance away, there would be nothing left in the cupboard. All I had was, leave me alone, get away from me, F you. That chip on our shoulder that we carry with us because we're afraid to let people know what's going on. And when I came to the rooms, they told me, John, the disease of alcoholism starts in our head. And what Alcoholics Anonymous did is gave me the willingness to want to change, but what it did is started to change my thinking. And I had to start changing my thinking. And how do we change our thinking? Through our actions. And what happens with our actions? When we change our actions, the results of our lives get better. And you know, now, even at 27 years sober and 62 years old, my first thought is still screwed. But it's the second thought that I live by today. That second thought is what you guys helped me understand. That even though my head still is wired to say no or get away or whatever, the second thought in my head today is what I usually act on. And that means I've learned how to pause. You guys have taught me how to pause. You have taught me how to think it through without opening my mouth. And those are the changes that we get here when we stick around. And those are the gifts that we get. Now again, if you're new, it doesn't start that way, right? And like all of us, you know, my life started, I grew up in New York City. I'm the oldest of 5 kids. My mother was born in Ireland. My father was born in Brooklyn. And, you know, as soon as she met my father, he was a great bullshitter. And the next thing you know, there's 5 kids, right? And, you know, living in the Bronx during the 60s, it was pretty interesting. You know, the world was changing at the time. My father drank, my mother drank, and, you know, and I grew up in a household that was filled with love. But when there's alcoholism in your house, it was also filled with dysfunction. So for a very long time, I was confused of what love was and how to show it. But as a young man, you know, we had this great family. You know, my uncle would come over. He was a bartender, and you know, at 6:30 in the morning, he'd show up, and they'd break out the beer, and my father would break out the harmonica. All 5 kids are in their underwear singing Irish songs. It seemed like a very normal life. And I would sing Irish songs in my underwear until I got sober. So it's just amazing. But the truth of the matter is, you know, we grew up in this household, and I realized that you know, when I got sober, that I had the disease of alcoholism way before I took my first drink. That I learned how to deal in chaotic situations as a young man. I learned how to lie. I learned how to hide. I learned how to shut people away. I learned how to shut things down way before I took my first drink. I probably started drinking at about 7 or 8 years old, little bits of sips by 9 or 10, a little bit more by 10, 11, and 12. Now I'm planning how I'm drinking. You know, I'm in 7th, 8th grade, 9th grade. You know, I went to Catholic schools, and, you know, I had this really... just this anger towards my father, because I needed somebody to blame on how I felt. You know, my mother was the hero, even though she was more of an alcoholic than my father. She was always pulling us out of whatever jam we were in. And my old man was the one that would drink his paycheck and do all these things. And you know, we all needed a scapegoat, and he was mine. And but growing up, you know, I started to become really defiant, and I got kicked out of every high school I was ever in. I went to good Catholic schools, and you know, life was just started to change. At 15 years old, I went from crew cuts to long hair and bandanas and leather jackets. I was a wannabe tough guy, and you know, being a tough guy in the Bronx, you had you know, I think we were born fighting and drinking, and started drinking in bars when I was 15 years old. I love the bar. I mean, even today, you could put me in a bar anywhere in the world, and I will feel right at home. 15 years old with a phony ID drinking, you know, and I started getting in trouble now. You know, I have, before I was 20 years old, I was arrested 20-something times for miscellaneous stuff, and it was all because I had a chip on my shoulder and I was angry. And I didn't know how to express my feelings. At 17 years old, I met this girl. She was beautiful. She was from a good side of town. She drove a car. And and I thought, that was always the missing piece. If I can just find that girl that would fill that hole inside of me, I would be okay. And I met this girl, and we got along really well, and we were dating for about a year, and then she came to me, she said, I'm pregnant. And she said, I think you got a drug and drinking problem. Now, nobody's ever said that to me before. And then she said something I didn't know about. She goes, will you go to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous? I'm 18 years old, have this woman that I love who's having a baby, and I said, sure. And I went to my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous at 18 years old, and I walked in, it was a bunch of old Irish guys with big red noses and white hair, right? There's a few of you around here today. And they read how it worked. And in the middle of how it worked, I gave them the finger, and I ran out. No idea of how petrified. And, needless to say, that woman wasn't too impressed with me. And 2 weeks before that baby was going to be born, she came to me and said, John, you will be an unfit father, and we're giving the baby up for adoption. Signed the paperwork. And, it took a long time before I got sober to get rid of that pain. Once again, I don't like to take responsibility for my actions. It's always somebody else's fault the way I feel. I can never take a look at myself of what I have done to cause how I feel. And that baby got born. She got born on March 21st. I got to hold her for 3 days. And on the last day, I went to go say goodbye. And she was behind the glass, and she was asleep. And the tears were rolling down my eyes because, I never knew how to express how I felt until I came to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous when you talked about incomprehensible demoralization. Because nothing else would have fit the way I felt except that. And as I'm saying goodbye, that baby woke up like she heard me and started crying. It was like somebody punched me right in the gut. And I carried that guilt and that shame with me for such a long time. I blamed her. How can you do this to me? How can you do this to me? And needless to say, my drinking didn't change. I needed to get rid of that noise that was in my head. I got a job working downtown, and because of time today, I'm just going to make it short. I was working in a shipping company, and let me just say I was working as a youth organizer in New York City. My job was to keep people from beating the hell out of each other and putting them into sporting events, which I was very good at. And I keep getting arrested because when I drink, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know who's going to say something that's going to make me, react. I don't know if I'm coming home. I don't know if I'm going to the job. I'm always getting in trouble. And so I got this job downtown, and everything was going real well. And, they have an office in California. And, you guys are very lucky, you newcomers and relatively people that are young. When I was younger, we didn't have sexting or texting. If you wanted to get laid, you had to do it the old-fashioned way and talk your way into it, right? I mean, there was no photographs. There was none of this stuff. And you had to learn to give good phone, right? I mean, the phone was everything, right? If you gave good phone, your chances became really good that you might get lucky. And I always gave good phone, right? And so what happened was I meet this girl on the phone in California. She's doing the same job that I'm doing. We're talking. She sends me a picture, blonde hair, blue eyes. I go home and get my Polaroid out. I give these action photos, trying to get the right one. Send them off, and now we see each other. It's like, whoa, yeah, okay, wow. And then, I go out drinking again, and I get arrested one more time. This time the judge is a little angry. He goes, Mr. Brown, I'm sick and tired of seeing you here. If I see you here again, you're going away for 3 years. I said, Your Honor, you're never going to see me again. I'm moving to California. See, I figured out my problem, the Bronx. Get the hell out of the Bronx. And 2 weeks after my 21st birthday, I bought a one-way ticket to California. Got this picture of the girl I'm going to meet me at the airport. I'm sucking down Cuba Libras on the plane. I'm ready. I get off the plane. I'm looking for this beautiful girl, and some other woman showed up. She was a little different than her picture. And, my sponsor was so kind. He goes, John, I know you didn't think you got what you wanted. Did you ever think she didn't get what she wanted either? I go, what? Yeah, she did not get what she wanted either, right? Because here I am, a 21-year-old kid, just left his mother's house. I'm a complete child. I have the emotional capacity of a 14-year-old boy. And I'm disappointed because she didn't look what she said she was going to do. So, but I'm in Seal Beach. I'm in Belmont Shores. And, I'm a quick learner. I get to Clancy's Bar on Main Street within the week. I got my BS down. I got credit at the bar. The dealer in the bathrooms giving me credit on the stuff that I need to keep going. I'm a special effects guy with my drinking, just so you'll know. I love special effects when I drink. And within that week, I'm in California, and I'm doing the same thing. And I leave Clancy's Bar across the street, and there was a policeman there. He goes, "Hey, kid, get over here." He goes, what are you doing? I go, "I'm across the street." He goes, "Do you realize you just jaywalked?" And I'm in California a week. I go, "Officer, are you out of your mind? I've been dashing cars my whole life." And then he said something that will be a common thread in my life. "Have you been drinking?" I got arrested for public intoxication 1 week. I'm in California, and just that MO of my life. That girl and we lasted about 8 days. I got a job. I met another woman at the office. She asked me to move in a week later, and she was everything that I wanted in California. She was a beautiful girl. She was smart. She was funny. And we got on really, really, really well. I'm still looking for that person to make me feel better. That hole inside of me. If you can just be that person. And because of time, I'll just share with you that, we had a beautiful summer together. And then in December, that first year, I got here in April. In December, my mother called and said, "Hey, you've never missed Christmas. I want you to come home." I was mad at her because I asked her to send me some money. She's got 4 kids, a husband who's drunk, and I'm asking for money as a 21-year-old kid. And I said, "Mom, I'm not coming home. I'm going to my girlfriend's house in San Francisco to meet her parents, and I'll call you when I get back." And when I got home, there was a note on the door, and my mother died. She had a heart attack in her sleep. She was 45 years old, and she drank herself to death. And once again, that incomprehensible demoralization. And I went back home for 3 months, and I didn't draw a sober breath. And the problem is that once again, I'm carrying this guilt and shame, that thought that if I would have just came home, I could have saved my mother's life. And for the next 16 years, I carried that with me. And thank God for good sponsorship, because good sponsorship will tell you, "John, you're not God. You can't make people live or die." I said, "But you don't understand." He goes, "No, I understand. You are not God." And I needed to hear those words, because that was one of the things I'll talk about a little bit, about the relief that I got here. But at that time, I'm 21, 3 months, no sober breath. I come back to California, and that girl loved me, and I loved her, but I'm an alcoholic, and I don't know how to deal with my emotions. And for the next 5 years, I put that girl through hell. I cheated on her. We spent money we didn't have, and we broke up. But my MO is there's always somebody waiting. There's always somebody waiting. And I met this other woman who liked to do special effects like I did. She liked to drink. She was also, a beautiful girl, and we started hanging out, and took her back to New York to meet my family, and all of a sudden we conceived a child, and and we drank. She drank like I did. I mean, she liked to drink. She liked to have a good time, and now you would think I would be overjoyed to have a second chance at being a father, And Friday night comes in. We're back from New York. She's pregnant. I said, "Honey, where are we going tonight?" She goes, "What do you mean?" I go, "It's Friday night. We're going out." She goes, "John, I'm pregnant." And if you're an alcoholic of my type, this is what you tell her. "Oh, my God, you're right. Hey, I'll be back in a couple hours." I have never once not meant that. I never once meant that I wasn't going to come back. I'm only going to have a couple. But when I take a drink, it takes a drink, and it doesn't matter if I have a child, a pregnant wife, a job. Alcoholics, I'm an alcoholic, and it does something to me different than my fellows. And I'm not proud to tell you, but that woman had to come into bars, pulling me out of bars, doing things married men with having a baby shouldn't be doing. But on March 31st, I had my daughter. Her name is Jessica, and she was born, and it was the joy of my life. And I wish the love of a child would be enough to keep me sober, but you guys know it's not. But I knew that I had a problem, and then after she was born for 30 days, I checked myself into a hospital because I knew I had a drug problem. And if I just got rid of that drug problem, life would be okay. And after 30 days in that hospital, I got out, I went to my sister-in-law's house. First thing I did was go to the fridge, crack open a Budweiser, take a sip, and look at all of them in the room like you're looking at me now. I said, my problems are over. I'm never going to do drugs again. And I meant it from the bottom of my heart. See, alcohol is cunning, it's baffling, and it's powerful. And I had no help yet. There was no God in my life. God was the last person in my life because I knew God knew everything that I did, and I knew I would never be forgiven. And I carried that with me for a long time. You know, I started drinking again. I went back to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous for a year. I did exactly the opposite of what they told me to do. They told me to sit down, shut up, and listen. They told me to get a sponsor and take these steps. And all I can tell them was F you, F you, F you. I sat at meetings, I raised my hand, I spewed out whatever crap was on my mind that day. After a while, they stopped calling on me, but I would still get up and start sharing because I had a lot to talk about. And I stayed sober for a year. Let me just say, I didn't drink for a year. I didn't stay sober. I didn't drink for a year. And instead of getting a birthday like we did tonight, I looked in the mirror and I said, I told you you couldn't be an alcoholic. And I stopped going to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I drank for the next 7.5 years. See, what I've learned in Alcoholics Anonymous is that if you cannot admit to your innermost self what the problem is, then this program of Alcoholics Anonymous is never going to work for you. Because it only works if you know what the problem is. And I could not admit, I knew I drank a little bit, I knew I did this a little bit, but I could not admit to my innermost self that I was an alcoholic. My mother was an alcoholic, my father was an alcoholic, my uncles were alcoholics. But when I looked in the mirror, I didn't see it. And for the next 7.5 years, I caused chaos in my life. 3 drunk drivings, lost every job I have. I should say, before I got sober, I lost every job I ever had. I screwed up every relationship I was ever in. And on March 8, 1995, with another pair of handcuffs on me is when I had my moment of clarity. And if you're new, I hope you can hear this. A moment of clarity is when you realize that they were right and you were wrong. It's when that moment of light shines in your head and you understand what the problem is. You understand that the problem is that you're an alcoholic. And I kept coming in and out of rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous to get my court card signed, and I met a man, his name was Alan Rosencrantz. And Alan gave me his phone number, and I would go out drinking, and I'd come home, and I'd tell my wife, I'm going to call that guy, don't worry. And I throw it back in the drawer. And when I got out of jail that night, I called that man. I said, hi, Alan, my name is John Brown. He goes, yeah, I remember you. He goes, what do you want? I said, I think I'm an alcoholic. He goes, good. He's been waiting for me, man. He was waiting for me. And I went to his house, and when he started talking, I told him about my life. And he said, are you willing to go to any lengths to get sober? You know, if you're new and somebody asks you that, be careful how you answer that. Because any lengths means any lengths. And at that time, I was ready. I was ready to do anything because I wanted to change how I felt. He said, John, we got to go to meetings every single day no matter what. You show up early, you stay late, and you sit up front and you hang out with the winners. I go, who are the winners? He goes, the winners are 5% of the people doing 90% of the work in the rooms. I'm like, really? He goes, don't worry, you'll see them. They're at these meetings all the time. They're setting the chairs up. They're making your food. They're making your coffee. They're your secretaries. They're the ones at the potlucks. They're doing all the work. And I started to go to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. And there was a man named Bob Ragland who I met with Alan that day. And Bob had like 45 years of sobriety. He was ancient, right? But my MO was, he said, hey, John, I'll see you tomorrow at the Marina Pacifica. I go, what time's that meeting? He goes, it's at 7 a.m. I go, Alan, I don't wake up till noon on Saturdays. And they would say something that would be the most endearing thing he would say for the next 5 years. He goes, look, you jackass. You just told me you're going to go to any lengths. I'll see you at 7. And I didn't get there at 7. I got there at 7:15, and I stood in the back of the room. And, I was uncomfortable like we are when we come back to our meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. But Bob Ragland got up and looked at me and said, hey, John, in the middle of the meeting, come sit next to me. And I want you to know that that moment was what I needed to feel part of Alcoholics Anonymous. You see, that little gesture that man made to me that night made me feel part of. And I've been feeling a part of Alcoholics Anonymous ever since. See, we don't understand the things that we do and how we affect people. We don't understand how the littlest gestures of remembering somebody's name, putting your hand out, getting them a cup of coffee, how it makes a difference because we don't know what people are going through. You know, I never came to Alcoholics Anonymous to get a sense of belonging, but I have a sense of belonging that I have never had in my entire life that I get in these rooms with the love that you guys give me. The unconditional love. See, nobody cares about how great we're doing, but everybody loves when we're a mess, right? I mean, it's just, we relate more to us when we're struggling than we do when we're successful, because we've all been there. That's the common bond that we have amongst us, is our struggle with trying to be happy in life, trying not to pick that drink up. And that man knew it. So my life in Alcoholics Anonymous started to really kick into gear. And, you know, like I said earlier, first 5 years I went to 2 meetings every single day. And my marriage was struggling. My daughter was afraid of me when I came in. She was 8 years old. And my wife, if she would have killed me, they would have let her off on a mercy killing because it was that bad in my house, right? But what happened was I started to get sober. And if you're newly sober or relatively sober and you're married and your marriage is not well yet, let me tell you what I did. I complained to my sponsor. I'm 30 days sober. My wife doesn't she know I'm sober? I'm 60 days sober. She ain't buying it. I'm 90 days sober. I'm 100 days sober. And my sponsor goes, John, do you remember every lie you ever told your wife? I said, of course not. She does. Remember every broken promise you ever made? No. She does. Just keep doing what you're doing, and it'll come around. And you know, he was right. It took a long time before she believed that this was something that I was going to do, because I broke so many promises. And it wasn't that I broke promises because I wanted to. You know, quitting drinking wasn't my problem. It was staying quit. It was staying not drinking. And Clancy used to talk about that spring that you have inside of you. And on Monday, you know, it's fine. By Tuesday, it starts to get tight. By Wednesday, it's tight. And my MO was I would always start a fight with my wife on Monday and make it even worse on Tuesday so I can drink on Wednesday. I did it for 20 years. It's a long time. Well, not 20 years, 10 years. But I did it for a long time, and I didn't understand that that was what I was doing. And now I'm going to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. I'm actively involved in the program, and life started to change. And it started to change when I started to take those steps. And I just want to share a little about those steps because I feel it's something that, you know, it's the reason why I'm your speaker tonight. You know, I always believed in God, but I didn't understand that when I take my own advice, I'm taking the advice of a complete jackass, right? Because my best thinking got me here. So when you looked at step one, and we're powerless over alcohol and our lives are unmanageable, every time that I manage my life, it's a mess. So how do we turn our lives over to a care of God of our understanding? You know, I didn't know how to do that because I told you I was afraid of God. And then they said, are you willing just to try? And so the guys that I sponsor today, and because I was taught on that third step, it's really 2 words in my life, and that is, dear God. Every time I can say the words, dear God, I'm inviting God into my life to help my thinking and the way I look at it. And then I had this huge 4th step. And this 4th step had, you know, all my resentments, and they were a lot, right? My father, my mother, all of them. And then I got to start to see for the very first time who I really was. You know, that sponsorship is such an important component of our success as being sober men and women. Because if you have the right sponsor who can get and talk to you about your character defects, to get to see who you really are and not the person you made up. Because I believe every single one of us had an alter ego out there. We all created the image of what I wanted you to think I was, not who I really was. And I come in here and you guys, you tear me down. And I started to take a look at who the man I really was. And you know, I was relieved. I was a little sad. I was a little relieved. And then I started to look at these character defects. All the things, the fear. You know, I thought I was a big, bad, tough guy. And really, I was afraid of everything. I was afraid of how you felt about me. I was afraid of what people thought about me. I was afraid. And I was angry. And I was jealous because I grew up with nothing. And I'm around people that have all these things. I'm envious. And things that you could have never, ever, ever had a conversation with me about before I came to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And then I had to start making these amends. And these amends were really, really difficult because the first amend I had to make was to my mother, right? My mother drank for all these years and I was really angry at her, but I loved her. She's 16 years dead now. And I was talking about, you know, all the things that she did, all the things that were just not what a young man should be dealing with in his house. And my sponsor said to me, John, let's talk about what you did. And I had to write this amends letter and asking her to forgive all the things that I did. Getting arrested all those times, getting kicked out of school, stealing money out of her purse, the fighting, the yelling, the screaming, the noise, all the things that we do when we live in alcoholic homes. And as I started writing these things down, the tears started rolling down from my eyes. And by the time I finished, I was sobbing. It's the first time that I actually ever wrote down all the things, and I remembered all of it. It was 2 pages of stuff that I wrote down in this amends. And I called up my sponsor, and I read it to him, sobbing again. And he goes, John, it's going to be okay. I said, really? Because it certainly doesn't feel that way. And the reason Monday night Seal Beach Speakers is my home group is because their format is 2 7-minute speakers followed by a main speaker. And nobody but my sponsor and God knew what I did that day. And when I walked in the room, like Randy did to Charlie, you're a 7-minute speaker. And in front of 200 people, I got stood up in front of a podium and shared what happened to me that day. And as I started sharing at the podium, I started crying again. First time I cried over it. And when I came down, somebody came around, they put their arms around me. They said, John, it's going to be okay. And for some strange reason, I believed them that night. And I went home that night and I slept like a baby. And I realized that I was carrying so much shame and guilt in my life. We are so fortunate about how we get to live our lives here. We have tools that most people will never use in our lives. We have the ability of starting over any time that we want. We have the ability of cleaning up any wreckage, no matter what has happened, if we're just willing to take a look at what our part is. I have no control over what my mother did, my father, even people in my life today, but I have 100% control over what I do and how I can make it better. And that's the gift that we get here, to be clean, to be free. They talked about happy, joyous, and free. And for a lot of times, that only sounds like a cliche. But it's not a cliche. To be happy, joyous, and free of the noise that have dragged our asses down forever. And that's what we get with the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, the next amends wasn't as good as the first one. The next one was to my father. And, I went to my father. I said, hey, Dad, I'm really sorry for not being a good son, but you were an asshole as a dad, and it didn't work, right? And I've learned that I wasn't ready to make this amends to this man. And so about a year went by, and he got hurt. He hurt his leg, and it turned gangrene, and he's 70 years old. They're going to cut his leg off. The doctor called and said, hey, Mr. Brown, we don't know if your father's going to make it. He's detoxing off of booze and cigarettes. We got to cut his leg off. If you want to see him again, you need to get on a plane. So I called my sponsor, and I said, I don't know what to do. And he said, John, you need to pray for God's will. I go, are you kidding? Is that the best you got? Are you kidding? I was pissed. He goes, look, jackass. Pray for God's will. I go, how do you do that? And then he said, dear God, whatever your will is, I'll accept. I got on that plane, and only I can say was, dear God, whatever your will is, I'll accept. And I got to his bedside, and he was in a coma for 2 weeks. I sat by his bed every day, and every day something started to change. He started to become my father again. I started to become his son. And on day 12, he woke up out of the coma. They took the respirator out of his mouth, and a week later, I got to take him home. And, something really phenomenal happened. And for the next 5 years, we became best friends. We went to ball games together. We sang Frank Sinatra songs in the car. When I spoke, he came with me. And, I got a gift that I didn't even want. I got the love of my father. And, here's how God works in my life. I took him back to New York a few years later to go to a wedding. And to make a long story short, it turned out the wedding was in a place he went to school. The school happened to be down the street. I go into the school. They asked me if I wanted his records. I go into the school, and it turns out my father was an orphan, and he never told me. He lived in an orphanage. His father died. His mother was an alcoholic. She couldn't take care of him. All of it's in this note. And, it's like these pieces of our lives that we just don't know why people are the way they are. And here I am reading this with my daughter on one side and my father on the other, the tears rolling out of my eyes, so grateful that I get to understand what this man had to go through his whole life. How does that happen? How does that happen to us? he got sick. We went back home. About 8 months later, he got sick, and I had to go pick him up, take him to the doctor. And we're in the car. I go, you okay? He goes, yeah, I'm fine. I'm just sick. I go, and he looks at me, he goes, son, I love you. I said, thanks, Dad, I love you too. Then he said, I'm proud of you. He's never said that in his life to me. And I'm like, damn, you must be sick. What's going on here, right? Shit. And I get him in a wheelchair, I wheel him in, and he died like a minute later. But I can tell you what I got out of it. I got this gift of being clean with that man the day he died, and knowing that he was proud of his son, his oldest son, knowing that he loved me and I loved him. And for 42 years, we couldn't stand each other. For 42 years, it was always a comment, a smart remark. He's drinking, I'm drinking, you're a jackass, you're this, you're that. And this is what the gift of Alcoholics Anonymous does for us. It heals every single thing in our life if we let it. My brothers and sisters didn't get that same joy from when my dad died. And it's hard for me to explain it to them because I do have 2 sisters that are in recovery and 2 brothers that need to be here, and they're not. But those are some of the things that have happened to me in my life. And by just taking direction, having good sponsorship, and saying yes. Saying yes. I did not want to make amends to that man. That little girl of mine, I had we had some damage, her and I, and when she went off to college, so we healed up, but she got off to college. She ran as far away as she could. She went to Colorado to go to college, and she came back and she moved right out. And for the next few years, it was it wasn't what I wanted. And then I got some advice, and it was like, hey, my daughter and I, he goes, well, are you telling her what to do still? I said, of course, I'm her father. Girls, I'm just letting you know, that's our job, all right? But he also said, why don't you stop telling her what to do, and why don't you ask her, would you like your advice? I'm like, what? That sounds like a trick. He goes, maybe, but at least you'll stop having this one-sided dialogue. So I called her up one day and I said, hey, how's it going? She said, hey, would you like my advice? She goes, no. I said, okay. She goes, is this a trick? She has a lot of her father in her. I said, no, honey, I love you, bye. For almost the next year. You want my advice? No, Dad. And then one day she said, yeah. See, we have to rebuild these relationships. And again, I left up to my own accord. My first thought is always trying to hammer home my point. But my second thought, thanks to you, is to take some direction. And 5 years ago, I got to walk her down the aisle. Happiest day of my life. We walked down the aisle. She was so happy. She looked so beautiful. And then 2 years ago, she handed me my grandson, Leo John. So, there's a lot of young kids in here, and it's hard to understand. But being a grandpa is fucking awesome, man. It is awesome because the difference is that I have unconditional love for another human being today. I'm not filled with fear. I'm not filled with anxiety. All I can do is give that little boy all my love. And on September 1st, his brother's going to be born, and I'm going to have 2 little babies to hang out with, right? I will tell you that woman that wanted to kill me, we had a long struggle ahead of us, and we wound up going to marriage counseling for about 4 years. And some of the things I learned in marriage counseling, that it wasn't my wife's job to make me happy. That was a real disappointment, to be honest. And the counselor also asked me a question. We were having an argument, and I started pouting, and she goes, do you always pout when you don't get your way? No. And I stomped my foot. She goes, you always stomp your foot right on cue? No. She goes, John, you got to stop acting like a 5-year-old when you don't get your way. And I'm like, oh, my God. So I told my sponsor, so he made me share that in my morning meeting. He made me get up and share. And, that was one of the things that my sponsors have done. They made me get up and share with all of you what was going on with me, so my pain and struggling may help you. Because sometimes we have to hear what we can do better instead of just doing the same thing over and over and over. And so, my story is, I've had a good life. I started a business. I told you I lost every job. I started a business 24 years ago. I have no idea how it's lasted, except that I have a primary purpose in this world, and I named the company Primary Freight, so I always remember my primary purpose. And I do that because, Alcoholics Anonymous has given me a life that I could have never, ever dreamed about. It's given me friendships and that I cherish in this world. It's given me an opportunity to become the man that my mother always wanted me to be. And because of that, I'm grateful. So thanks for letting me share tonight.